Welcome to the foundry. I'm back working on the Dodge Rammer again, and my last videos on that truck got a couple, 2 or 3 views, so I thought, well, maybe somebody might be interested in kind of staying current with that truck in terms of how it's holding up and as it gets used. So I've got it in the shop here, and all I'm really doing is a full bumper to bumper service, fluid changes, and a little bit of preventative maintenance. I'm going to put a one part in the transmission while I got the pan off, and I'm going to change the oil, change the fuel filter, and discuss future upgrades that we'll probably do to this truck. So I thought I'd start with the transmission because it's the hardest. I figured I'd get that knocked out first, the rest would be downhill. Now, the previous owner had recently serviced the transmission, and that was probably about 5,000 miles ago, give or take. So the reason I'm doing it again is because he told me he didn't adjust the bands, and that's kind of important on these 47 REs that are behind the Cummins and these 3/4 tons. And I really want to get that done. I'm not having any problems out of it. It's shifting great. I just want to stay on top of things because these transmissions are known to be a little bit finicky if you don't maintain them properly. And while I'm in there, I thought it'd be a good time to update or upgrade the governor pressure solenoid. I'm putting a Borg Warner unit in it, and it's a little bit more beefy than the factory one, and I think he said he actually did that, but he didn't know what kind of regulator, what kind of governor he went with. And I just, they're not terribly expensive. This whole kit was like $75, $80, something like that. So I thought I'd go ahead and get it in the chance that there's a factory style still in there. I want to get rid of that, put a better unit in. It also comes with the transducer, so I'll go ahead and replace that. It comes with a speed sensor. My speed sensor is working fine, so I may not mess with that. That's not a big deal. That's an easy fix if I need to do it down the road. And then of course it comes with the gasket and the filter. So if you found yourself like I have with the unfortunate task of having to do this on the ground, I've done a few things to kind of mitigate the misery, and it might help you out too if you ever have to do this. I was going to lift the truck up. I had some metal ramps, and that big heavy diesel just folded them like an accordion. Absolutely destroyed my 1970s car ramps. And I've had 3/4 ton trucks on those ramps before, but apparently I've never had a diesel on them because that sucker's heavy. It destroyed them. So I'm just going to do it flat on the ground without a creeper, which kind of sucks, but being a 4-wheel drive, I think I've got enough room. So I've put some cardboard down to kind of make it, to where I don't get just super filthy and protect the concrete from a bunch of oil stains. It's not like there's already a bunch of stains all over my concrete, but and you'll want a sizable drain pan. Now, one thing that's going to help me out is I went down and got a fluid extractor from Harbor Freight. And they make, well, I don't know what they make anymore, honestly. They used to make this one, or used to stock this one. My store doesn't hardly stock anything. But I could rant on Harbor Freight for a while, comparing it to what it used to be to what it is now and all that. But I'll save you that mess. That's one that I got to use to work with when I service industrial pumps. I use that to dispense barrier fluid into seal pots on pumps. And because this one will extract and dispense, and it's been a really good unit. I have used it for about a year, and I use it every week in pretty rough conditions. And I would be using it today for this job, especially if that fluid's like perfectly clean. I could actually redispense it back into the truck and keep it totally clean. But I don't want to contaminate my unit with used oil because I have to have it for very expensive, purely clean barrier fluid to go in those pumps, so I'm not even gonna mess with it. So I went down and got this one, and it's the only one they had with a hand pump. They had some pneumatic ones, but all of them only extract. They didn't have a single one that dispensed, and that's very unfortunate because I really enjoy the one that does both. So we're going to see how this one does. But my idea behind it is, being how I'm on the ground, if I have to wrestle with that pan full of fluid, it's going to make a colossal mess. I'm going to be rolling around in the mess, for the duration of my little repair. So I thought with this, I'll go ahead and extract the fluid out of the pan. That way when I pull the pan, much less mess to deal with. Now, I don't know if it'll work out, but we're going to try it. So there's been a slight change of venue. My buddy next door texted me, told me his car lift was available. So I just kind of transitioned over here. I thought it'd be easier to video, and plus it'll be a lot easier on my person. I'm going to start by removing the ATF with the suction device, and the first thing I did was spike it on the concrete, and that's just to prove its durability. I didn't accidentally drop it. It only takes a couple of pumps and she starts pulling a vacuum. Comes with a variety of tubes, so you can fit down in through the dipstick tube, and it starts filling it up there. I'll pump it and get it going really good. But I wanted to point out a couple little things about this that's kind of neat that my other rig doesn't have, that I wish it did. One is this little part right here is to put your foot on if you had it flat on the ground. I had to elevate it so I would have enough hose to reach the bottom of the pan. But that's really cool. I wish my other one had that. This pump feels a little bit more robust than the one I've got that I use at work. And it also has a relief valve right here so you can stop suction without just pulling the hose out. The one I've got has a directional valve. It's a spool valve from suction to discharge. But sometimes that spool valve gets stuck and it won't stop in either direction no matter what you do with it. So that would be nice. Rather than having to unscrew it to lose your pressure or vacuum to make it stop. So I thought that was pretty cool, so I'm going to pump on this thing and see how long it takes to drain that pan. Once you establish the siphon, it'll go ahead and draw the fluid without you having to pump the handle. Now you might have to bump it up to get it to go a little bit faster every few minutes. It takes a little bit of time. You got to think we're trying to draw like 6 quarts through that tiny straw. So it'll take a few minutes, but in my opinion, it's worth it not to have to deal with the colossal mess underneath. Now, if you don't mind rolling around in filth, then by all means, just pull the pan and be done with it. But I try to keep, just a little bit clean and presentable, just long enough to avoid the homeless look. So that actually took a little less than 5 minutes, and we got about 2.5 liters out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and lift this thing up, pull the pan off. Before I drop that pan, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the front band, and it is right there in and amongst all that mess. So I'm going to get that clean and then just kind of tie that TV cable linkage out of the way, and that ought to be fun. And another feature, a built-in feature, when you're working, outside of your own shop, away from access to all of your own tools, is the availability of tools. So I thought ahead, and I brought a screwdriver, a butter knife, and a pair of jumper cables. So I'm golden. You can see it a little better now. So what you want to do is that outside nut there or the lock nut is a 3/4 inch nut. So get a wrench of some variety and loosen that, and then you want to put an inch-pound torque wrench on the stud, which is a T40 Torx, and tighten it to 72 inch-pounds, and then back it out 1 7/8 turns, then tighten down the nut while you hold the stud so it doesn't move, and you should be good to go. So I got the front band adjusted, and it pretty well brought the stud almost totally flush with the nut, which indicates it's got some wear, which, that's consistent for a stock transmission that's got 200,000 miles on it. Some of that could have been mitigated had previous owners adjusted them properly at service intervals, but it is what it is. It's not what I would call just slap wore out, but it's getting there. I mean, it's got it, ideally you want couple 2 or 3 threads, still on that stud after your adjustment, and I've got half of a thread, so it is what it is. So I got the pan off without incident and without making a huge mess. And another little piece of good news, the inside of the pan is very clean, so that's awesome. All right, so this is the pressure regulator I'm going to replace, and that's the sensor. Go ahead and get this filter off. I just give it a little twist and kind of pull down just gently. So I ended up pulling the block because you have to get this sensor out. There's a little clip in there you have to release, and this slides out. You can see a clear difference between the small factory style regulator versus the upgraded Borg-Warner regulator. Just a beefier unit. It's supposed to give you a little better shifts and flow and whatnot. So I'll also note there's a upgraded version from this. If you're going to be putting power to the truck or building you a nice transmission, there's a modification where you can put a General Motors style regulator in there, and it comes with a whole block and everything. I don't know, it seemed like it was like $250, give or take $20, I don't remember. Now, being my truck's bone stock, I'm not hot rodding it. I don't pull especially heavy with it. I just went with the upgraded Borg-Warner, and I think that'll be fine for what for what I'm using the truck for. All right, one pitfall to avoid, and this isn't just an exact how-to step-by-step video. I'm just kind of hitting the highlights of things to look for. There's plenty of step-by-step videos around, but these Borg-Warners have two notches. Your notch is what holds the regulator up in place firmly. It goes in the heat shield, and what you want to do is use the notch closest to the solenoid section itself. Do not use that inside notch. If you use the inside notch, it won't shift, or it won't shift right. So while I've got the regulator off and out of the way, it'd be a good time to go ahead and adjust this band. Same type of procedure as the front band. It's still 72 inch-pounds, but it's 3 turns out instead of a turn and 7/8. That's the band adjustment right there. Now that I got the rear band adjusted, I can go ahead and go back in with my regulator assembly. Got my gasket up there. Just get it hand tight. You'll want to torque it to 102 inch-pounds in a crisscross pattern. So I got it up there. I'm about to torque it down. One thing to note, if you're going with a Borg-Warner regulator, you have to twist this plug 180 from where it was before to slide it in. Everything else is pretty much the same. It also bears noting, I should have said this in the beginning, this truck is a 1999 model. So in 2000, they went to a different style transducer, but it all still pretty much works the same. All right, band's adjusted, new parts installed. Now I'm gonna get my pan cleaned up and a new gasket. Get the pan back on. While I'm under here, I'm gonna go ahead and change the oil, and then we'll get this thing on the ground, get new oil, new fluid in it, and take it for a test drive. So I've checked all my fluid levels. I drove it around the block, and checked the fluid again, and engine oil, everything's good. Now before this service work, this truck drove really good. The transmission shifted good. But I tell you what, now the shifts are so much, I guess you'd say smoother, not to be confused with soft. It's a good shift. It just seems a lot more responsive. And I would attribute that to adjusting the bands, and it's possible that regulator, the updated regulator, plays a little bit of a role in that. But I put it this way, it's shifting as good or better than it ever has since I've owned it. Of course, that hadn't been long, but so far I'm happy with it. I'm fixing to get out of here and get it out on the highway and see what it does up in overdrive and lockup. There's lockup. So the one thing I noticed off the bat on the highway is the lockup engagement. It's not as abusive as it was. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but where you really notice it on the highway, when you're up above 45 miles an hour, lockup is engaged, and every time you let off the pedal, it drops out of lockup, and as soon as you touch the pedal, it goes back in. And where that'll get you, if it's a bit abusive, where it will become, you know, irritating, is if you're trying to maintain a steady speed. And so, you know, sometimes that requires, you know, let's say you're going downhill, you got to let off, push it back down. In an abusive lockup engagement will become irritating, and it's really kind of smoothed out. It, like I said, it never was just terrible, but it is better now. So that's another little benefit of this little bit of service I did to it. So this is a 99, so it's got this style fuel filter housing. I think they changed them in 2000. So I got a drain pan under there. I'm going to open the petcock, or the drain, and empty that out so I don't make just a colossal mess. And I think all it amounts to is you take this nut off right here and it drops out the bottom. It holds quite a bit of diesel. Inside the bowl there, it looks like I've got a little bit of sediment down there, so I'm going to clean that out before I stick my new filter in there. And I got it back in there. These 24 valves have electric lift pumps, so to get the air out of it, I'm just going to turn the key on and let the pump prime. Cycle that key a few times, and you can also, a little pro tip, if you just bump the engine a little bit, don't let it start, just bump it, the fuel pump will run a lot longer. And then I'm going to do that until the pump sounds normal, or I don't hear air bubbles back at the tank. I don't see any leaks. Let that thing prime for a minute. Or I think it's 30 seconds is how long it'll run, I'm not sure. So I primed it a couple times and it wasn't quite enough, so what I ended up doing was while the fuel pump was running, I backed out this plug right here that's on your pressure side, and it had some air in it, and when it blew fuel, tightened it back down, and then it fired right up. But it did make a substantial mess under here, and so for once I'm glad I didn't have my camera sitting there. So in terms of fluid service, we're pretty much all done. We changed engine oil and filter, transmission fluid, filter, did the little upgrade with the regulator, adjusted the bands. That was the main thing I wanted to do throughout this whole thing. This other stuff was just ancillary because it wasn't really overdue or anything. I did fill up the transfer case, but I didn't change out the fluids in the differentials. I did check them. And as far as antifreeze coolant, it's got a new radiator in it. Right before I bought it, my buddy put a new radiator, new water pump, and new thermostat, new cap, and change of fluid. So we're good there. So really, the only other little thing I want to do to put this thing back on the road for another 5,000 miles of hopefully trouble-free service, I'm going to pull this door panel and see what's going on, why my speaker's not working. If you watch my previous videos when I was doing interior stuff, let me just pull this key before somebody has a seizure. This tweeter here and the door speaker didn't work. And I thought since they both didn't work, what are the odds of both speakers being bad? You know, I'm thinking it's the wire. So you can go back and watch that, but what it ended up being up here was the speaker itself had failed. When I put my new A-pillar in, it had a speaker in it. It's actually a used one. I painted it to match and all that. It had a speaker in it, so it works. Put it in there, that works. This does not. So I'm gonna pull this door panel, and if I can't see anything just obviously wrong, I'm gonna go over to the parts truck, grab a speaker out of it, pop in here, see if it works. So this is a speaker out of the parts truck. It looks kind of rough, but I just tested it and it works. This is something to do with, I don't know what this is. This is something to do with the magnet. The parts truck, they had cut that off altogether, and the only thing that was in there was a speaker. So I wasn't sure what was going on. But I just hooked everything back up the way mine was, and the thing works. So that's better than what I had. The paper back there, it all looks good. I don't see any cracks or blown spots. So I'm just going to clean it up a little bit and stick it back in here. Put my door panel back on, and we'll see how it sounds. Take it for a test drive. I believe I'm done with pretty much everything else on the truck. So I'll be happy to get this thing back together on the road, and won't have to service again until the next 5,000 miles, and then we'll do a oil change, or I don't know how often you're supposed to change that fuel filter, but you know, I'll stay on top of that. And then we'll move on to something else. So after a full service, I was cleaning the old girl up and vacuuming the floor, and when I pulled the floor mat out, I realized that my floor was soaking wet. First thought was, oh no, not the heater core, you know. Then I started rubbing the old lobes together, and I found that the water is coming from this right. There's a shadow, yeah, okay. This right here, and it's running down the firewall right to here and soaking the floor. So I went around to the firewall. That's the drain for the condensation. The evaporator core is in that box, and somewhere up in there, and that's the drain. And we'll take a look at it from underneath. I'll show you what I'm dealing with. So you see that little black spout sticking out of the firewall underneath the dryer. It's got a little drip of water on it. That's where your evaporator core box drains the condensation out onto the ground. Now it really needs to be a 90 right there, because you see how that water is trying to accumulate on the bottom of that spout, and if you're not parked somewhat downhill, that water runs back into the cab. Now there's kind of a grommet or some sealant around that, but apparently you can't rely on it, because Oh, man, I'm getting too old for this because it's not sealed. And so I'm gonna see if I can't find a little solution to that issue. I've got a couple of items here that I hope will be useful in my endeavor. I'm going to start by trying this elbow. This is a rubber PCV elbow. This is the big end, which I think will stretch and fit around that spout. I'm going to angle it straight toward the ground so it can't drip back down into the cab. If this doesn't work, if it's the wrong size, this is a 5/8 heater hose elbow, and I believe I can cut a little piece of hose and slide it up on that spout and angle it toward the ground that way. So I'm just gonna have to get under there and see what I gotta do. Well, it looks like the PCV elbow fit just perfect. It's a good tight fit. You can already see water running out of it, and that'll angle it down toward the ground, keep it from running back into the cab, hopefully. So I believe that'll solve it. It'd be nice to get a quick and easy fix to something for once, but time will tell. I still can't get over how good this thing shifts. I've got a slightly firmer first and second, and very solid engagement. Just overall, the transmission performs a lot better. As for the speaker, you'll have to take my word for it. I can't play anything. A, it wouldn't sound good, you know, through the camera anyway. And B, I'd get kicked off I'd get a strike or whatever for copyright, I'm sure. But anyway, taking a little trip in it now, a little short trip, about 30 miles one way. And overall, everything's doing good. So I'm gonna wrap it up right here, and I'll see you guys in the next one.